What's up, guys? So in today's video, we are going to start out with a little bit of rearranging so that we can make room for one of two new elevated platforms that we're going to be building today. I also wanted to rotate and slide the bakery down just a little bit so that way this area feels a little bit more dense. And then I also want to go back eventually and build a larger fountain right here. Zooming out, here are the two sections we are going to be working on today. So let's start with the first one next to the bakery. All right, so working on the first elevated section, I'm going to do some basic blocking just to get the height and the dimensions right, and then start laying out the stairs just so I kind of understand how everything is going to be positioned. Next, we're going to add some masonry bricks to the stairs for detail, and then this second staircase we're going to build out in a similar fashion, but I'm just going to attach it to this turntable so that it's really easy to sit at an angle, and then I'll go back later and fix some of the structural, more support issues at another time. And you can see here I had to go back and revise the stair design a little bit so that the angled plate was actually on the other side so that the stairs could properly rotate. So here you can see the first basic building footprint. I have a little bit of an angle and a curve. I've also used a Technic plate so that when I run wires through it later, it just makes it a little bit easier to hide them. So now let's look at how this fits in the city. You can see I've elevated the second building platform. I think we're headed in the right direction. I think we should get some good view corridors out of it. So I'm pretty happy with the work so far. So next, let's start working on this section here. I have got to figure out how to transition these two. So I think what I'm going to be doing is a combination of stairs and elevated hill sections. So let's get to work. So here I'm using ball joints, a Technic brick, as well as a turntable to create this angled hill section. And it's not the sturdiest technique using the ball joints in this way, but honestly, I have so many of these on hand that I just needed to find a way to use them. I like when I build my hill sections, I like to build them on sort of its own module. You can see here with that dark gray plate, just makes it easier to move things around, as well as when you're putting it on an angle. Just using a turntable will save you a ton of time and a ton of Lego math. And when I use this technique, I like to also add tiles underneath that plate so it sits flush. And then depending on the situation, sometimes I'll add a jumper or just a stud to hold it in place so it doesn't slide around. Another thing you can probably tell is when I'm building elevation, I build very high level and I use all kinds of different colors just so that I get the base of the building and the footprints all set. And then I go back through and I clean it all up. But you can see here, I added in this elevated ramp before I really finished out the building footprint. So now that I know the angles, it's much easier. And when it comes to building the actual platform, sometimes I'll build the platform first if I have a specific height that I want to reach, or sometimes, like in this scenario, I'll build the ramp first just to make sure I get the right slope and angle, and then I'll figure out what the ultimate height of that platform needs to be. And for the second ramp, I'm just using a really simple hinge brick. Honestly, it doesn't have to be complex. You just need it to get the job done. And then I'm also using one of the sand green support pillars with a little 1x2 wedge on it, just so that the plate can properly rest and it doesn't sag. And here you can see I've started to add the next platform. So again, sometimes I'll just play around with the heights and use different bricks and things just to make sure I get a clean transition from each elevated section. So I always like to do a quick check-in as I'm building just to make sure that the build will actually fit in the city and that I'm achieving the look that I want. But next, it's time to make sure that this will actually be compatible with the build from last week's city update. So let's go ahead and see how these fit together. So I think so far we're in good shape. Obviously, those two sides of the dark orange building need to get revised, and that was always the intent, which is why I left them blank. So that will create some really nice synergy in that part of the build and have kind of a four-sided building. And then the other small building down here on the base fits in absolutely perfectly next to the little tan building, and will cover up this big ugly gap and kind of empty void in between those two buildings. And now I've added in the next ramp, this time using a different technique. I've used a 1x2 modified plate with the bar, as well as the 1x2 modified plates with the clips. And this just goes to show that you can build elevation with all different types of pieces and techniques based on what you have on hand. Another helpful use of these sand green support pieces is it really helps you to make sure that all your studs are aligned. And you can see here, I use them just to build something tall, just so I make sure everything sits nice and flush. And I decided halfway through to switch the first ramp to stairs just so it was a little more varied and a little more interesting to look at. And another thing I do when I'm building these large elevated sections to keep things easy to transport and move around is I'll actually use jumper plates and tiles underneath the building footprint so that the first floor is actually built on its own plate system and then just attaches down to the base plate. You can see I'm doing that here as well. And then now I'm just going back and adding in some structural kind of filler bricks so that things are well supported throughout. And now building up the back section, you can see here I've got room for approximately 3 buildings, although one of them would only be 4 wide, so it would be a little tight. So I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen in this section. I may add 2 buildings and then put some stairs in between on that black 4x4 plate, but we will see. And another helpful tip with these support pieces, if you want to secure them more, you can use a Technic brick and the pin and then just secure it to your build like that. It is really nice because they can get a little wobbly if you get pretty tall with them. So similar to the other elevated section, we are going to add some masonry bricks to these stairs, and then we are going to work on a whole bunch of tiling in the front. Now, thankfully, because I'm using these old sidewalk mills plates, it's much easier because I can just take off the 4x4 plates and then just reattach them and just fix any little gaps. So that's made it really nice. I am going to be doing a little bit something different here. You can see I've got the rounded tiles in the middle, so this is going to kind of lead up the hill. Now I do have these black plates underneath. I'll probably end up going back and switching those to dark tan just because I think the black looks a little unnatural. And next we're going to continue the round tiles up the different hills. Unfortunately, I am starting to run low on my rounded tile and plate selection, so the variety is a little less than I would like, but overall I think it's still looking pretty good. So unfortunately, I ended up running really low on parts, so I wasn't able to finish the tiling for the rest of the hill section. But here is where it stands so far. You can see the angles are just about there, just a little bit of cleanup to do, but let's go ahead and place this in the city now. Okay, so not bad. I think we're headed in the right direction. I'm really happy with how the transition is looking so far, and I think it's also going to create some really nice sight lines in the city. One thing I should also point out is that this mills plate has a total of 6 available building pads on it, so it's actually going to be one more than the last section of the hill section. So really excited to keep working on this and start working on the buildings and really just start packing in the density. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I know I have been having a ton of fun building all this elevation, but I have got to get back to work because I have a lot of buildings to plan. So if you want to see the buildings that I'll be working on in the near future, don't forget to hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time.